You are not losing because you are weak. You are losing because you make noise when you should create pressure. You explain, you react. You defend your intentions like a man begging for permission to exist. You call it being fair. You call it being clear. You call it being a good person. But the result is always the same. You give people your inner control panel, and then you act surprised when they start pressing buttons. You already know the moments. At work, your manager throws a vague accusation into the room. I feel like you are not aligned lately. You instantly start talking. You list your tasks. You justify your schedule. You prove your loyalty. You think you are protecting yourself. You are not. You are volunteering to be evaluated. You accepted their frame. You stepped into their court. You handed them authority, and then you performed. In your relationship, she goes quiet and cold. Then she drops a loaded line. I guess you do not care. You rush in with explanations. You overtext. You over-validate. You offer emotional refunds you do not owe. You think you are calming the situation. You are not. You are teaching her the easiest way to control you is to imply guilt and watch you scramble. With friends or family, someone makes a disrespectful joke at your expense. It is small enough to deny, big enough to sting. Everyone watches your face. You laugh too loudly. You try to keep it light. You pretend it does not matter. You think you are showing confidence. You are not. You are showing you can be tested publicly and you will protect the group's comfort instead of your own status. That is the deeper cause. You were trained to be helpful, obedient, agreeable. You were trained to keep the peace, not to keep the advantage. You were trained to talk your way out of tension instead of letting tension do its job. And because you were trained that way, you confuse force with control. You think control needs volume. You think dominance needs speeches. You think authority needs constant proof. Machiavelli did not survive by shouting. He survived by understanding one silent rule. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is an operation. Silence is what keeps your opponent guessing, and guesswork is where people start making mistakes. Silence is what prevents counter-moves. Silence is what makes others reveal themselves while you reveal nothing. The silent rule Machiavelli used to stay in control is simple. The man who speaks first under pressure is the man who is being led. The man who explains is the man who is asking to be forgiven. The man who fills the gap is the man who cannot tolerate uncertainty. And the man who cannot tolerate uncertainty will always be managed by someone who can create it. Control does not need force. That is the illusion people sell to weak men. Real control looks calm. It looks delayed. It looks unreadable. It looks like you can sit in discomfort without begging for resolution. That is why operational silence is so dangerous. It makes people project. It makes them confess. It makes them chase. And when they chase, they are no longer leading. You are going to hear several truths in this video, not advice. Truths, power shifts. Each one will feel cold if you are still addicted to approval. Each one will feel obvious if you have ever watched a high-status man do almost nothing and still control the room. You'll see why exposure is your real pain. You'll see why your need to be understood is your weakness. You will see why the most effective dominance is silent dominance. Most people will leave after the first few minutes because they cannot stand reality without a moral blanket. They need to believe the world rewards effort and honesty. They need to believe that explaining yourself earns respect. They need to believe being nice protects them. It does not. If you are ready for uncomfortable realism, you stay. If you ignore this, you remain controlled. If you stay, you separate from the herd. Put your phone face down and listen. If this hit you, write "I am the strategist" once in the comments just to mark the day your mindset changed. Now you are going to see what Machiavelli understood. Silence is not passive. Silence is a weapon that makes other people move first. And the first move reveals the hand. The first reversal is this. The person who demands explanations is not seeking clarity. The person who demands explanations is testing your position. They are pulling you into their frame where they are the judge and you are the defendant. You think the conversation is about facts. It is not. It is about hierarchy. You see it at work all the time. A colleague says, "Why did you do it that way?" in front of others. The tone is not curiosity. The tone is inspection. If you start explaining, you confirm the inspection. You confirm they have the right to audit you. You start listing reasons like a man trying to earn a license, and the room learns something. The room learns you can be put on trial. Common behavior creates weakness here because you were trained to be transparent. You think transparency equals trust. In power dynamics, transparency often equals surrender. You expose your thinking. You expose your fear of being misunderstood. You expose that you are willing to work to regain approval. And the more you explain, the more angles they have to counter you. Explanation is material. Material becomes ammunition. The moral inversion is brutal. What feels good is weak. It feels good to clear your name. It feels good to show you are reasonable. It feels good to be seen as cooperative. But that feeling is the feeling of a compliant man returning to the cage because the cage is familiar. What feels cold is effective. The cold move is to answer without entering their court. Short, neutral, controlled, or to pause, look, and let their question hang for a moment, as if it is not automatically valid. Machiavelli's lens is permitted here. He understood that appearances govern outcomes. If you look like you're being evaluated, you are being evaluated. If you look like you are calm and selective, you become the evaluator. Silence is how you refuse their frame without saying, "I refuse your frame." You do not argue the frame. You starve it. You do not feed their inspection with your nervous honesty. The power shift is simple. When someone tries to interrogate you, do not rush to fill the gap. Let a beat pass. Make them feel the weight of their own question. Then give the minimum response that keeps you upright. You are not hiding. You are controlling exposure. Exposure is what makes you weak. Control is what makes you dangerous. In real life, that might look like this. A manager says, "Why were you offline for an hour?" You do not panic. You do not confess your whole day. You hold eye contact, you pause, and you say, "I was handling a priority task. Everything is on track." Then you stop. No extra details, no apology. Silence after the statement is the seal. If they want more, they have to ask again, and each extra demand reveals their motive. They either need information or they need submission. Silence forces them to show which one. The second reversal is about arguments. Most men think winning an argument equals winning status. That is a childish belief. In adult power games, arguing often means you already lost. Because the moment you start arguing, you accept the other person's reality as the battleground. You stepped into their court again. You let them set the terms. You let them set the emotional temperature. You let them drag you into reacting. Look at relationships. She says, "You always do this," and it is vague on purpose. If you argue, you are trapped. You start defending against an accusation that has no shape. You start chasing a moving target. You say, "No, I do not always do this." And she says, "See, you are doing it right now." Now you are in the loop. The loop is the cage. The loop is how you get managed. Common behavior creates weakness because you want a resolution. You want to be understood. You want peace. So you buy the argument like a man buying relief. You pay with your composure. You pay with your time. You pay with your authority. And when you pay, the other person learns they can create chaos, and you will purchase calm at any price. The moral inversion is again ugly. What feels good is weak. It feels good to prove your point. It feels good to correct their false story. It feels good to win on logic. But logic does not dominate emotion. Frame dominates emotion. What feels cold is effective. The cold move is to refuse the vague frame, not with a lecture, with silence, distance, and a simple boundary. Machiavelli understood something you need to accept. People do not respect the man who explains forever. People respect the man who can withhold attention. Attention is currency. When you argue, you spend attention on someone who is disrespecting you. You are paying them to keep going. The power shift looks like this. When the accusation is vague, your answer is minimal. You do not defend against fog. You do not wrestle smoke. You say, "Be specific," and then you stop. Or you say, "I am not doing this conversation in that tone," and then you go silent. That silence is not sulking. That silence is operational. It forces the other person to either adjust or escalate, and escalation exposes them. In real life, your partner says you do not care, you do not flood her with proof, you do not send paragraphs. You pause. You say, "I hear you, speak clearly about what you want." Then you stop. If she keeps throwing fog, you do not chase it. You exit, calmly, not as punishment, as a statement of frame. Your silence says, "I do not accept guilt as a tool." And that changes the entire balance. The third reversal is about being liked. Most men think social approval is safe, so they keep talking. They keep smoothing edges. They keep explaining their intentions. They keep making sure nobody feels uncomfortable around them. They do this because they fear exposure. They fear being seen as harsh. They fear being seen as selfish. They fear being seen as a threat. But the truth is simple. If nobody is slightly cautious around you, you are not respected. You are convenient. Watch the workplace again. A man who is too friendly becomes the office therapist. People dump problems on him. They take his time. They ask favors. They borrow his energy. Then they forget him when promotions are discussed. Because he made himself available like a service, he thought warmth would earn loyalty. It earned usage. Common behavior creates weakness because you confuse niceness with authority. You think that if you are agreeable, people will protect you. They will not. They will protect the person with leverage. They will protect the person who can say no without shaking. They will protect the person whose presence feels optional, not needy. The moral inversion is clear. What feels good is weak. It feels good to be liked. It feels good to be seen as easygoing. It feels good to be included. But inclusion is not dominance. Inclusion is often a bribe to keep you harmless. What feels cold is effective. The cold move is to let people wonder where they stand with you, not by playing games, by refusing to over-explain your stance. Machiavelli's lens makes it blunt. Love is unstable, respect is more reliable, and fear, in controlled doses, is sometimes the only thing that keeps people honest. You do not need people to fear your anger. You need people to fear losing access to you. Silence creates that fear. Silence makes your approval scarce. Scarcity creates value. The power shift is this. Stop chasing being liked. Start controlling your approval. When someone tests you with a joke or a subtle insult, do not laugh it off. Do not explain why it bothers you. You do not need a speech. You look at them. You hold the pause. You let the room feel the tension. Then you say, "Do not do that again," and you move on. Calm, no rage, no drama, just authority. That moment changes everything, because you did not seek group comfort. You did not seek approval. You took the space. You set the frame. Silence before and silence after the boundary make it final. If they argue, they are the on-escalating. They are the ones looking emotional. You stay still. The fourth reversal is about questions. Weak men answer questions as if every question deserves an answer. Strong men treat questions like bids for access. Not every bid is accepted. Not every request for your inner life is granted. Most people ask questions to locate your limits. They want to map you. They want to predict you. Prediction is control. You see this with friends and family. Someone asks, "So who are you talking to lately?" They are not always curious. Sometimes they are checking their status. Sometimes they are fishing for insecurity. Sometimes they want information to use later. If you answer too openly, you reveal your structure. You reveal your priorities. You reveal who matters to you. Then they know where to strike. At work, a coworker asks, "Are you applying elsewhere?" That question is not friendly. It is a probe. If you say yes, they can paint you as disloyal. If you say no, they can treat you as stuck. Either way, they win information. Information is leverage. Common behavior creates weakness because you want to be seen as open. You want to be seen as honest. You were trained that privacy is suspicious. But in power dynamics, privacy is a position. If you have no privacy, you have no leverage. You have no leverage. You become readable. Readable men are controllable men. The moral inversion hits again. What feels good is weak. It feels good to answer quickly. It feels good to show you have nothing to hide. It feels good to be the nice guy with no secrets. But that is the same as walking into a negotiation and handing over your numbers first. What feels cold is effective. The cold move is to answer with a controlled surface, or to redirect, or to simply not answer. Machiavelli treated information like a weapon. He understood that people use your words as ropes. They tie you to positions. They trap you in past statements. Silence cuts those ropes before they exist. The power shift is this. When someone asks a question that reduces your position, you do not rush, you pause, you decide whether the question earns an answer. Then you respond in a way that keeps you in control. "Why do you ask?" is not a friendly line. It is a dominant line when delivered calmly. It forces them to expose motives. Motive is what you want. Motive is what people try to hide. In real life, a friend asks, "Are you and she serious?" You can say, "We are good," and stop. Or you can say, "I keep my private life private," and stop. The stop is important. Silence after the line prevents negotiation. If they push, they reveal entitlement. You watch them reveal it. You do not argue about your right to privacy, you demonstrate it. The fifth reversal is about emotional exposure. Most men think vulnerability is automatically attractive or noble. That is a modern lie told to men who need to be softer so they are easier to handle. I am not telling you to be a robot. I am telling you something more dangerous. Emotional leakage makes you predictable. Predictable men can be played. In relationships, the moment you show that jealousy controls you, you become controllable. If she can trigger you by posting a photo, if she can pull you into a spiral by delaying a reply, she now has a remote control in her pocket. She does not even need to use it. Just knowing she can is enough. You will self-correct. You will chase. You will offer concessions to avoid that feeling again. At work, if you show that criticism shakes you, you will get more criticism. Not because people are evil, because people follow momentum. If you look like a target, you become a target. People test what is allowed. Your reactions teach them what is allowed. Common behavior creates weakness because you want people to understand you. You want to be seen. But being seen is not the same as being respected. Exposure is expensive. Every time you expose your inner world to someone who has not earned it, you lower your value. You put your nervous system on the table. The moral inversion is harsh. What feels good is weak. It feels good to vent. It feels good to confess. It feels good to show emotion, to prove you are real. But that relief is temporary. The cost is permanent. What feels cold is effective. The cold move is emotional discipline, not repression. Discipline, the ability to feel without leaking. Machiavelli's lens makes it clear. The ruler who is easy to read becomes a ruler who is easy to overthrow. People do not attack what they cannot map. Silence is camouflage. Silence is armor. Silence buys you time to decide, and time is power. The power shift is practical. When you feel triggered, you slow down. You speak less. You choose fewer words. You let silence carry the weight instead of your explanations. If someone tries to bait you, you do not take the bait. You let them sit with their own attempt. You make them feel the awkwardness of their own manipulation. In real life, someone says, "Why are you so quiet today?" They are probing. They want to pull a confession. You do not confess. You say, "I am focused," and you continue. Your calm refusal to perform makes you larger. It signals that your inner state is not public property. The sixth reversal is about confrontation. Most men think confrontation means raising the volume, showing anger and showing force. That is because they confuse intimidation with control. Machiavelli did not need constant intimidation. He needed compliance. Compliance comes from certainty. Certainty comes from consistency. Consistency comes from boundaries that are enforced quietly. You see this in male friendships. A guy repeatedly disrespects you with small cuts. He borrows money and delays repayment. He shows up late to your plans. He jokes at your expense around women. If you confront him with rage, he can call you emotional. He can make you look unstable. If you confront him with a speech, he can debate you. The debate is delayed. Delay is evasion. If you do nothing, you train him to continue. The weak man chooses between rage and silence. The strategist uses silence and action. Silence is not doing nothing. Silence is removing access without explanation. Common behavior creates weakness because you want fairness. You want closure. You want the other person to understand why you're upset. That is the approval trap again. You want them to validate your boundary. You want them to agree you were wronged. You want them to give you moral permission. But boundaries do not require permission. Boundaries require enforcement. The moral inversion is sharp. What feels good is weak. It feels good to argue your case. It feels good to show receipts. It feels good to deliver the final speech. But speeches are for men who need the audience. What feels cold is effective. The cold move is to withdraw privileges, reduce availability, stop investing, stop responding quickly. Let the absent speak. Machiavelli's lens is direct. Punishment should be decisive, and it should not create ongoing hatred through messy drama. The cleanest punishment is the removal of benefit. When people stop gaining from you, they adjust, or they disappear. Either outcome improves your position. The power shift is this: when someone crosses a line, you do not always announce it. You act. You move differently. You become scarce. You become slower. You become less accessible. You stop giving them the soft rewards they were using. And you do it without emotional display. That is silent dominance. A real-life example. A friend keeps disrespecting your time. You stop inviting him. If he asks why, you do not lecture. You say, "It does not work for me," and you end it there. He will feel the loss of access. He will either correct or resent. You do not negotiate with resentment. You let resentment burn while you stay calm. The seventh reversal is the deepest. Silence is not only how you defend, silence is how you attack without looking like you attacked. Most men think aggression must be visible. They want credit for it. They want people to see their power. That need for recognition is the weakness. The real operator does not need applause. He needs outcomes. In office politics, the loud man argues in meetings. He corrects people publicly. He makes enemies. Everyone sees him as intense. He thinks he is commanding. The silent strategist lets others talk. He watches alliances. He notes who interrupts. He notes those who avoid accountability. He does not expose his full view. Then, when a decision is needed, he speaks once. Short, certain. People follow certainty. They do not follow noise. In relationships, the man who keeps explaining his value looks desperate. He sends long texts. He tries to prove he is different. He tries to prove he is loyal. He tries to prove he is safe. But safety is not what creates respect. A woman respects a man who is self-contained, a man who does not chase, a man whose attention is not guaranteed. Silence creates that. Silence tells her you do not need to convince. You decide. Common behavior creates weakness because you have been trained to market yourself. You think you must constantly show what you bring. You think you must constantly clarify intentions. But when you market yourself too much, you communicate that your value is not obvious. Valuable men do not need to prove value. They demonstrate standards. The moral inversion is final. What feels good is weak. It feels good to be understood. It feels good to be praised for communication. It feels good to be called mature because you talk everything out. But constant talking is not maturity. Constant talking is anxiety with a polite mask. What feels cold is effective. The cold move is a restraint. The ability to let misunderstandings exist when the misunderstanding is not your problem. The ability to let people doubt you when their doubt is a tactic. Machiavelli's permission is the last stamp. He understood that controlling perception is more effective than controlling bodies. You do not need to force people. You need to position them so they move in ways that benefit you. Silence is positioning. Silence is the absence that makes people self-correct. Silence is the space that makes them overthink. Overthinking is where they create their own fear, and fear makes them careful around you. Now, integrate what you just saw. The reason operational silence works is that people are addicted to certainty. They want to know where they stand. They want to know what you think. They want to know you are angry. They want to know if you approve. They want to know if they can push again. When you give them constant answers, you remove the cost of testing you. Testing becomes cheap. Cheap testing becomes constant. Constant testing becomes your life. That is how you become socially invisible. Not unseen, but unimportant. People still talk to you. They still ask favors. They still invite you when they need a number. But your presence does not change the room. You are tolerated, not valued. You are managed, not respected. You become the man people feel safe disappointing. It happens slowly. First, they interrupt you because you never punish interruptions. Then they joke about you because you never freeze the room. Then they bring you problems because you always listen. Then they ignore your needs because you never make them costly. Then they forget you when rewards are given because you never created leverage. You think the solution is to talk more, to clarify more, to communicate more. That is the trap. More words do not give you more control. More words give other people more access. More access gives them more counter moves. That is the psychological threat. Counter moves happen when you expose your plan, your emotion, your insecurity, your desire to be approved. Every time you explain, you give them a lever. Silence removes the lever. Silence creates fear, but not the childish fear of violence. It creates the adult fear of uncertainty. People fear what they cannot predict. People fear being the one who miscalculates. People fear being the one who oversteps and loses access. When you are quietly consistent, people start to feel you as a fixed object. They adjust around you. That is dominance without noise. Distance creates authority, not distance as in cold hatred. Distance as in non-availability. If you are always reachable, you are not respected. If you reply instantly to every message, your time has no value. If you always show up, your presence is not felt. Scarcity creates value. Scarcity makes people measure their words. Scarcity makes them consider consequences. This is not cruelty. This is not a game. This is realism. The world is not built for your comfort. It is built for incentives. People respond to incentives, not speeches. If your attention is free, they will waste it. If your boundaries are negotiable, they will negotiate. If your emotions leak, they will test for leaks. Not because they are monsters, because they are human, and humans move toward advantage. Machiavelli did not romanticize people. He did not expect gratitude. He expected movement. He expected self-interest. When you adopt that lens, you stop being shocked. You stop being offended. You stop being reactive. You become strategic. You become calm. You become the man who watches, waits, and speaks only when speech creates impact. Operational silence means you do not give your opponent the information they need to counter. It means you do not show the wound while they are still holding the knife. It means you do not try to win morally. You win structurally. You win by controlling access, timing, and attention. You win by refusing to be pulled into someone else's court. And understand this, silence is not just what you do with your mouth. Silence is what you do with your face. Your reactions are also speech. Your panic is speech. Your nervous laughter is speech. Your over-eagerness is speech. The strategist becomes still. Stillness is a message. Stillness says, I do not need you to like me. Stillness says, I can walk away. Stillness says, your tactics do not reach me. When you live this way, you will notice the change. Some people will disappear. Good, they were feeding. Some will become polite. Good, they learned. Some will test harder. Good, now you can see them clearly. Silence is a filter. Silence reveals who respects you and who only respects access. Now the last part is simple. You do not need to announce this shift. You do not need to tell people you are becoming different. That is still seeking approval. You just change the pattern. You speak less. You pause more. You answer selectively. You stop explaining your boundaries. You enforce them. You let discomfort sit in the room and you do not rush to rescue it. You let other people carry their own emotions. You stop being the emotional janitor. Here is one real-world challenge. The next time someone tries to pull you into a defensive explanation, do not do it. You pause, you deliver one clean sentence, then you stop talking. Let the silence stretch. Let them feel it. Let them try to fill it. Watch what they reveal when you do not rescue them. The next time someone uses guilt to control you, do not argue with guilt. You do not beg to be understood. You state your position once and you end the exchange. If they escalate, you create distance, not drama. Distance. Let the loss of access teach the lesson. If you can do that, you will feel it. Your life gets quieter. Not because people are kinder, because people are more careful, and careful people are easier to manage than chaotic people. That is the point. Silent dominance. If you want more of this, like the video, share it with the one man you know who still thinks explaining earns respect, and subscribe. Do not consume this content like entertainment. Use it as calibration. If this hit you, write "I am the strategist" once in the comments, just to mark the day your mindset changed. Now put the phone down again. Speak less, watch more. Let silence do what force never could. You are not here to be understood. You are here to stay in control.